Before dawn, the church bells began to ring. Not for prayer, not for a funeral. Another family was calling for help. Imagine a medieval town. People are living their normal lives, until suddenly someone starts screaming as if their body is burning from the inside. He throws himself to the ground, tears off his clothes, and his fingers turn black and begin to fall off. And the worst part, he is not alone. This is not war, not a king's punishment, and not the plague. This is something doctors once called St. Anthony's fire. But what was it, really? We travel back to Europe between the 10th and 15th centuries. A world without modern medicine, without knowledge of bacteria, without understanding poisoning. People depend on the land, and their main food, bread. But this bread will become the cause of one of the most terrifying epidemics in history. No one realized that the danger was already inside the food they ate every day. It started quietly. People were eating rye bread. But in some regions, the grain became infected with a fungus. It was invisible at first. It looked like part of the plant, black, hard, almost harmless. But inside it carried a poison stronger than many modern toxins. This fungus caused a condition known today as ergotism, Claviceps purpurea poisoning. The symptoms looked like a curse. It started with tingling in the fingers, then unbearable pain, then a feeling like fire was burning under the skin. People said fire was flowing through their veins. Then gangrene began. Limbs turned black, and sometimes they simply fell off. But the worst part was psychological symptoms. People experienced hallucinations, demons, saints, sometimes even euphoria before death. In panic, people turned to the church. They believed it was a divine punishment, especially the punishment of St. Anthony. That is how the disease got its name. People traveled to monasteries. They prayed. And sometimes, they actually recovered. But it was not a miracle. In monasteries, they often ate different bread, cleaner bread, without the toxic fungus. Today we know the truth. It was not a demon, and not divine punishment, but a fungus. Claviceps purpurea, growing on rye. It produces toxic alkaloids that affect the nervous system and blood vessels. These chemicals cause the sensation of burning fire and mass poisonings across medieval Europe. Entire villages could be affected after a single harvest. During the Middle Ages, dozens of major ergotism outbreaks were recorded. The most notable include: in 857 AD, thousands of people were affected in the Rhine Valley. In 944 AD, according to medieval chronicles, tens of thousands of people died in France. Periodic outbreaks continued across Europe until nearly the 18th century. Why was ergotism so common in the Middle Ages? Several factors contributed to its widespread occurrence. Poor grain storage conditions, lack of knowledge about fungi and their toxins, inability to separate contaminated grains from healthy ones, heavy dependence on a single grain harvest for food. Some historians suggest that ergotism may have contributed to episodes of mass religious visions, cases believed to be demonic possession, isolated incidents of mass panic and witch hunts. But perhaps the most fascinating question is this: could an ordinary fungus have changed the course of European history? At first, the idea sounds impossible. Yet some historians believe that during major ergot outbreaks, entire communities experienced hallucinations, overwhelming fear, and intense religious ecstasy. Imagine a small medieval town where dozens of people suddenly claim to have seen angels, demons, or signs of the approaching end of the world. Today, we might recognize these as symptoms of poisoning. But in the Middle Ages, such experiences were often seen as undeniable evidence of supernatural forces. The strangest part is that people were holding the cause of the disease in their own hands. Bread was the foundation of nearly every meal. People ate it every single day. For that reason, no one could imagine that danger was hiding inside an ordinary loaf of rye bread. The first symptoms often appeared only after some time had passed. As a result, almost nobody connected the illness with the bread they had eaten days earlier. One of the most terrifying symptoms of ergotism was not the pain or even the hallucinations. It was the overwhelming sensation that the body was literally on fire. Victims described their hands and feet as burning from within. Many plunged their limbs into rivers, wells, or barrels of cold water, but the relief lasted only a few minutes. That is why the disease became known as St. Anthony's fire. To medieval people, this agony felt like a punishment sent directly by God. They had no idea that toxins from contaminated grain had already been circulating through their bodies for days. The fungus did not actually burn the body. Instead, it did something even more terrifying. Its toxins caused blood vessels to constrict dramatically. Blood could no longer reach the fingers and toes. At first, victims felt tingling. Then came numbness. Eventually, the affected limbs turned black. Without modern medicine, this often resulted in the loss of fingers, hands, or feet. To medieval physicians, the condition was completely mysterious. During the 11th century, the Order of St. Anthony was founded. Its monks devoted their lives to caring for people suffering from the mysterious disease. Pilgrims received clean bread, fresh water, and constant care. Remarkably, many of them slowly recovered. The monks believed they had witnessed miracles. In reality, the explanation was much simpler. Once patients entered the monastery, they stopped eating contaminated bread. Without additional toxins entering their bodies, many gradually began to recover. Medieval physicians desperately searched for an explanation. Some believed the disease was caused by poison air. Others blamed the positions of the planets. Many saw it as divine punishment for human sins. Yet almost no one considered the most common food on every table. Ironically, some doctors even encouraged patients to eat more bread to regain their strength. Without realizing it, they were making the illness even worse. The real culprit had been sitting in front of them all along. But it would take centuries before humanity understood the truth. You might think this story belongs entirely to the past. But that isn't completely true. Ergot still exists today. Every year it infects fields of rye, wheat, and other cereal crops around the world. The difference is that modern agriculture knows how to control it. Before grain reaches a mill, it passes through several stages of cleaning and inspection. Specialized machines remove contaminated kernels, while laboratories test crops for dangerous toxins. That is why ergotism has become extremely rare. The fungus is still here. We have simply learned how to live with it. Perhaps the most surprising part of this story is that ergot is not only studied today. Scientists use some of its purified compounds to create medicines. These drugs can help treat certain types of migraine. Others are used to control severe bleeding after childbirth. It sounds almost unbelievable. The same fungus that once killed thousands of people can now help save lives. Of course, only after careful purification, precise dosing, and decades of scientific research. It is a remarkable reminder that nature itself is rarely entirely good or entirely evil. Everything depends on how humans learn to understand it. Now we arrive at one of history's most controversial theories. Could ergotism have played a role in the witch trials? The idea has fascinated historians for decades. At first glance, it seems entirely plausible. Ergot poisoning can cause hallucinations, strange behavior, violent convulsions, and intense paranoia. During the Middle Ages, such symptoms were often interpreted as signs of witchcraft or demonic possession. However, modern historians urge caution. The witch hunts were driven by a complex combination of religious conflict, fear, politics, superstition, and social unrest. Ergotism may have contributed to isolated incidents. but it is unlikely to have been the primary cause of the witch trials. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is not the fungus itself. It is how easily people can misunderstand the true cause of events. For centuries, communities blamed demons. They searched for witches. They performed religious rituals. They believed they were facing curses and supernatural forces. Yet the real cause was astonishingly simple. A tiny fungus growing on an ordinary ear of rye. The story of ergotism reminds us that the greatest dangers are sometimes the ones hiding in plain sight. We often assume that history's greatest tragedies were caused by wars, pandemics, or natural disasters. But sometimes, history was shaped by something so small that almost no one noticed it. A simple fungus hidden inside ordinary grain brought fear, suffering, and death to countless people over the centuries. Today we understand its true nature. Yet this story reminds us why science, critical thinking, and the search for evidence matter so much. Because what once appeared to be supernatural often turns out to be nothing more than biology waiting to be understood. If you enjoyed discovering one of the Middle Ages' greatest mysteries, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel, because many more incredible historical stories are waiting ahead. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.